my life is nothing like Marianne's, clearly, like from almost every aspect of it.
Yeah.
And so why I like this book the most, I thought it was like, oh, because it's the best plotted or because the storylines wrap together really well. But no, it's because there's an aspect about Marianne's character that I relate to. I just didn't realize it until Victoria broke it down.
Because now Jino gets to wear his hair any way he likes.
That's not it. That's not the part of it.
Hey, and welcome back to Nostalgia Club. This is a podcast where three podcast sound designers, editors, whatever, take a break from work to talk about the media from their childhood that they're nostalgic for. Some of us know about it, others of us don't. Today, for example, we're talking about The Babysitter's Club, which is Victoria's specific stomping ground, among many other books. And Jino and I were newcomers to this. I don't know how many of you listeners know about The Babysitter's Club, but it's like, it's a lot of books.
There's a lot of books. I'm going to be honest, I have not read all of the Babysitter's Club books. I'm not like that diehard of a fan where I was like, I read all 500 books when I was a kid. No.
I'm also making the assumption everybody knows who we are at this point. I should probably introduce everyone. I'm Michael.
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Jino. Hi.
Hey, Jino.
Hey, Michael.
How you been?
I'm good. I just read a bunch of Babysitter's Club books.
Wow. You know, it's funny you should mention that because I did quite the same.
We should talk about this.
That's crazy. No way. I also read Babysitter's Club books.
Oh, geez. The Babysitter's Club.
Okay, so today we're specifically talking about 4 Babysitter's Club books that I forced Jino and Michael to read. No, basically I was like...
It wasn't forced. Come on.
I felt a little bad about how many books I wanted you guys to read, but when
4?
I was...
It's not bad.
I just made y'all read like a series of 5.
Yeah, but I was like, that's a lot. We're also like watching an entire anime season, so the next 2 episodes are just for me. Anyways... I guess some backstory is I grew up reading some of the Babysitter's Club books, but specifically I read a lot of the Babysitter's Club graphic novels. And at the time, only 4 of them were published. Now there's a lot more graphic novels adaptations of other books, but these 4 are the ones that I am personally most nostalgic for. So I was like, I want to reread the original book series to refresh my memory because I'm sure I read it, but again, like the graphic novels, because I read them more, they're like fresher in my brain. So I wanted to see how the original books translated to the graphic novels, like how similar are they? And also because recently there's a Netflix adaptation of The Babysitter's Club and it's so good, guys. Like I feel like it's now one of my comfort shows because it just feels so healing to me. So I was like, let's also read these books and see how they changed for the TV adaptation. So I don't know if you had a chance to watch the TV show as well, but we specifically read the first book, Christie's Great Idea. Then we read The Truth About Stacy, Marianne Saves the Day, and then Claudia and Mean Janine. Jino and Michael have never read The Babysitter's Club. So what are your initial thoughts on the series?
Jino?
Michael.
Oh.
That's our names.
Ah. Ho ho. Shall we say them again? No. First book, I was like, huh.
Yeah, no, that's about right. I don't know if it's whether I just don't really vibe with Christie's worldview. Christie's outlook.
Yeah.
Something about the first book is a little...
They're getting their feet. They're getting their sea legs.
But by the time I got to Marianne's book... I was in it. I was locked in.
What order did you end up reading them in?
The order
The
in
listed
which,
order?
There technically is a chronological order.
Yeah, I read them in chronological order.
I think I did too. Marianne's is the third.
It's technically the 4th book in the series.
Gotcha.
But we skipped one because it's useless.
I skipped the 2nd book because I was like, of the Claudia books, I like the 7th book better.
The 7th book, Claudia and Mean Janine, that was really good.
Yeah.
And with the title like Claudia and Mean Janine, which is like, oh, Claudia doesn't get along with her sister. I was like, this could be a number of things.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be like, I was sort of taken aback.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of became, for me, like the pinnacle in our reading experience of what I feel like was slowly building across the 4 books that you selected for us, which was like it was the height of displaying the nuances of like the characters and their relationships, partially with their friends, but also with their family. Jino, you were locked in by the third one, Marianne Saves the Day, was it?
Yeah, I was talking to you a bit about this before, Victoria, before we started recording. How dare I? But the first book, I mean, when you get into like a kid's book, you sort of expect a like overarching theme or an overarching plot to kind of like guide you through the book. But for the first Babysitter's Club book, that doesn't really come in until like the third act. And so you spend a lot of the book kind of in this like slice of life, almost episodic storytelling style that seems sort of aimless and not really going towards any one specific message or theme or plot line. And only towards the end does it surprise you with, hey, divorce is hard and remarriage. Whoa, what's happening?
Yeah.
Life changes. And Christy's loud.
It's the most like that in the first book for sure.
Yeah, but then every single book after that we read at least, seems to have some sort of cohesive theme or cohesive message and sort of like a more traditional, I guess, 3-act structure to follow.
Yeah.
And so I was able to read those easier.
I think the first book, it's mainly like, I mean, the A story is like Christy has this idea. She wants to start a babysitting business with her friends. And so a lot of the episodic stuff is like, oh, each character is going to a babysitting job and here's what they learned from that job and here's how they improve their business from what they learn. For example, they start keeping a diary after each job so that other members of the club can also kind of stay in the loop. Like, oh, this person is allergic to strawberries, so let's make sure to note that. Or this person doesn't like dogs, so let's keep that in mind for any time we sit for this kid. But also there's the B story of Christy's family and how she doesn't appreciate her mom's new boyfriend, later fiance, and kind of the tension between her and change, basically.
And I was surprised to see that in book one, where our point of view character is like a child of divorce who is actively in the middle of what is quickly becoming like a remarriage.
I think for me, that's what is so special about these books is the characters feel so real. Like not a single character has what I would consider like a perfect family or like an idealized life. They're all very real. They all have their likes and dislikes, and they all have family issues. They all have conflicts with their friendships even. And so it just feels like such like a well-rounded world. It feels like you're in the neighborhood with them because they live in like this small town. So like everyone knows each other. Christy, Marianne, and Claudia all grew up together. So there's also even in the first book, like their friendship is kind of weird because like they grew up together, but now like Claudia has different interests than Christy and Marianne. So they're like not even sure if she like wants to be part of the club, but through the club they end up basically like reconnecting and becoming better friends again.
They're fully realized real people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Each of them you could describe with a sort of character cliche or a trope if you had to. Like Christy's the tomboy, the sporty one, whatever term best suits whatever one-liner. Marianne is the shy, somewhat repressed one. Claudia's the artsy kid. Stacy's an out-of-towner and like more glamorous or fashionable. But when you read the books, like that is a very like...
That's just the surface level.
That's a very surface level. And they're all pretty, I mean, I guess the term we've been using so far is like real people, fully realized characters. It's very even keel. And it's only like in extenuating circumstances where maybe you see Christy's like more aggressive side come out or Marianne's shyer side come out. But most of the time, they're just kids. It's really nice.
Like they're allowed to be like messy. They definitely don't always say the right thing or do the right thing, but I just think it's like so important to have that as like a kid, to like have characters where you're like, oh, this isn't like someone who is like completely unrelatable to me. And it's just like well-written kid characters, I would say. Even like a lot of like the kids that they babysit, they all have like their little like nuances that not only help you remember who they are, but again, like make this community feel so lived in.
Yeah. It's great too for like a young audience reading this series is that because every single book seems to not only focus on a different main character, but also divulge into a different sort of hardship or change that a young person could experience. there's almost guaranteed going to be one or at least a few books that a kid's going to fully relate to.
Yeah.
And then for the rest of the books, you're learning about these experiences from like an empathetic outside perspective. And so it's really great for kids to get the full spectrum of American suburban human emotion.
No, exactly. That breadth of points of view from the characters. And you get this in the conflicts as well, even with characters whose point of views you don't get a direct like first person relation from. There's like this environment of like empathy and understanding.
Yeah.
Which is only further added to with like the sort of serialized continuity of the books. And they're written in a way that you can basically pick them up, it seems like, at any point in the series. Because
there's always like a slight recap at the beginning where they're like, oh, this is what the Babysitter's Club is. Here's what happened in like the last 2 or 3 books that's important for you to know. Here's what's important about some of the core characters for you to know to like get into the story. But yeah, you could hypothetically pick up like book 50 and still understand what's happening. I mean, it's a basic premise too. It's like there's these middle school to high school girls. They have a babysitter's club. They babysit for people. Like
a small business.
Yeah.
And yet it's really rewarding to read them in chronological order.
Yeah. Because you can actually see like the character growth and the progression of the characters, even if it's like in like those small details.
Yeah. So Victoria, we've covered on the podcast before, especially with the Nancy Drew episode. You've read so much.
Too much, some might say.
I there's no such thing as too much, but goodness, so much. And so when you mention like, oh, I read The Babysitter's Club. Oh, but I didn't read all like 100 books. I don't know how many there are exactly. But like, how far did you get within them, as much as you can remember? And also, where did this fall in line with like the...
It's a really great question. I genuinely don't know.
Just sometime in kiddom you read a bunch of these?
Okay, my clearest memory is in my elementary school library. I remember like going in there and like seeing the Babysitter's Club books and then just kind of like picking out the ones that I wanted to read. Weirdly, because I've said in the Nancy Drew episode that I insisted on reading all the Nancy Drew books in order, I don't think I had a similar conflict with the Babysitter's Club. I think then I like kind of outgrew them a little bit. Once I got to middle school, I wasn't really reading The Babysitter's Club anymore. But then that's when I discovered the graphic novels. And the graphic novels, I think I discovered because also the first artist for the graphic novels was a graphic novelist that I really loved. And so I read some of her other graphic novels. I think her name is Raina Telgemeier. I might be saying the last name wrong, but she wrote books like, there's a book called Smile, which is about Raina's, like, it's an autobiography about a time when she like knocked out her 2 front teeth as a kid. And then like her journey of like regaining confidence in her smile, of like going through all the dental procedures, and also like some of her like personal life is like kind of woven in. She has other books like Sisters, which is about just specifically like her relationship with her sister growing up. She's also written some like non-autobiographical stuff. But I really loved her art style and just her way of storytelling. And so I was like, oh, she also illustrated these Babysitter's Club graphic novel adaptations. And I love them. It like brought back all of those memories of like reading the books. And I was like, oh, I love these characters. I used to also practice drawing by like basically like copying the art style. And I think I just kept going back to those graphic novels. Sometimes like if they were at the library and I saw them, then I picked them up and just read them again. I think like Raina did 4 books and then it shifted to another illustrator for another 4. And then now they've like the illustrator switches off every 4 books. So it's also really great because it gives a lot of like newer illustrators like a spotlight. And I just think that's just also pretty neat. And I love graphic novels as well. So just like a mesh of a bunch of things that I loved all together. Specifically, I read Mary Ann Saves the Day so many times. I think that one and Christie's Great Idea, I remember the most clearly, like literally when I was rereading the actual novel, I could like so clearly picture what the graphic novel had done for like specific scenes. And it really is like almost like a one-to-one of like things that happened in the books to the graphic novels. Obviously, some things are like truncated, but the overall storyline is like, it's a very like accurate beat by beat adaptation. But I think like for Mary Ann's book, Marianne's story is about how she like gains confidence in herself to not only like stand up to her friends who sometimes kind of look down on her for like being shy, and she has this complicated relationship with her father because her mother died when she was young, and so her dad is very overprotective, like won't let her choose what her hairstyle is, won't let her choose what clothes she wears, has a very strict like curfew, and it's her coming into her own and being like, hey, I'm 12 now, almost 13. I want to start like getting my own style and like getting more confident in like my physical appearance, but that also reflects like how much more confident she's becoming internally too. And I think in a graphic novel, because you can actually see visually like, oh, like she seems so much happier simply by like taking out her hair braids or by getting to like change a little bit of her wardrobe. Like that's how visually like these like small changes that you can see more in a graphic novel. I mean, obviously like you can imagine it through the novel, but I think for me, like I was particularly drawn to that. I also think the character conflicts in Marianne Saves the Day are really interesting because it's the first time that all the Babysitters Club doesn't talk to each other. Like they have such a bad fight that they're like, we hate each other right now. Because I've been like a new kid at school and like knowing how hard it is to make friends, like Marianne becoming friends with Dawn, I think is like really important to her character development because it's like Christy's been her best friend ever since she was a baby. And Christy's a great friend, but at the same time, I think like Marianne gets boxed in by like her relationship with Christy because it's like they've known each other for so long and like Christy is like much more outgoing and assertive than Marianne. So it ends up like Marianne just does whatever Christy wants to do. But I think after meeting Dawn, Marianne just becomes so much more confident in herself. And now she's able to actually like call out Christy for things that she's like, hey, that's kind of not okay. Or be like, listen, both of you can be my best friends and it's fine. Yeah.
Is this what therapy feels like?
Jino tilted his head back and had a look of almost like somnolence on his face. Like
that's why I like this book the most. Now I understand.
Yeah.
No, I mean this is what I'm saying. My life is nothing like Marianne's. Clearly, like from almost every aspect of it.
Yeah.
And so why I like this book the most, I thought it was like, oh, because it's the best plotted or because the storylines wrap together really well. But no, it's because there's an aspect about Marianne's character that I relate to. I just didn't realize it until Victoria broke it down.
Because now Jino gets to wear his hair any way he likes.
That's not it. That's not the part of it. My parents didn't care what I wore. No, it's the aspect of like being friends with someone who so often takes the spotlight and who's such like a huge personality, like Christy.
Gino has feelings about Christy.
No, Christy's cool. But like being friends with someone who takes such a big part of the spotlight and not being able to feel like you're your own person when you're around them, but they're also like one of your best or only friends.
Yeah.
And so like you don't really have a personhood without them. And it's only when you step away from them do you truly realize like what that was like, and you also like are able to expand your personhood.
Yeah.
And like self-actualize.
Yeah. Dawn's character is one of my favorites, mainly because of like her relationships with other characters. Because basically like Dawn comes in, she's like the new girl in town. She's from California. She's like really hip and cool. And she comes in right when Marianne is having this fight with her friends. And Marianne becomes really good friends with her. In later books, like Christy becomes pretty jealous of her relationship with Dawn, just because like Christy's like, that used to be me. Like I used to be the only person you spent time with outside of school. And now like Marianne's kind of splitting her time between different friends.
You can kind of see it get set up too.
Yeah.
In like a couple of the later books we read.
Yeah. Christy actually ends up becoming good friends with Dawn, or like finally like opening up to her, because Dawn is also a child of divorce. And so the two of them, like Christy realizes like, oh, you're actually like the first person I can talk to who like actually gets it. Like my other friends are supportive, but they're not children of divorce. So they're not going to fully understand like what it's like to like move to a new place because like your parents just split up or stuff like that. And it's just so good.
How many babysitters join the club by the end? Does the number just keep growing exponentially?
I think this is like where I like kind of stopped reading. Later on in the series, there's two more kind of like alternate officers who join who are more prominent. So one is Mallory, Pike. She's mentioned a lot in these books because she's part of the Pike family where they have like 8 kids and she's the eldest of them.
She's like slightly younger, but she helps out.
Yeah, she's slightly young. She's like in that in-between where like she doesn't really need a sitter, but she's also not old enough to like be a babysitter. So what they end up having her do is they start like kind of like letting her help out when they're babysitting and like quote unquote training her. And then later on when she gets into middle school, they're like, okay, you're going to be like a junior officer. And then also around the same time, Mallory joins. There's another girl, Jessie, who's a ballerina. Jessie was important in just the canon of the Babysitters Club because she was one of the first, I think she was the first black main character. So that was particularly significant. And then I think later on, I didn't read this, but I briefly skimmed online, but I think later on, like Dawn moves away from Stony Brook for some reason. Yeah.
Dawn's so great, though.
Yeah. And then another person joins the club after her. I don't know who it is.
Another Californian.
I don't know.
They got to keep up the quota.
Dawn.
Yeah.
Devastating.
I gotta say, one thing that really registered with me in the first book in particular, not like from personal experience, but was just how on the ball all the girls were with having the official titles of their positions. Like, okay, let's form a club about babysitting. Who's going to be the president? Who's going to be the vice president? Who's going to be the first officer? Who's going to be the treasurer? Who's going to be the main secretary? I was
Delegation
like,
is important.
That's a kid thing to do.
Yeah.
Like now we need positions.
Yeah, it's really fun. Just curious. I think you watched a few episodes of the TV show, right?
No, I opened up the Netflix page and then I looked at it and then I went, oh, I need to watch 10 more episodes of Haikyuu, which you'll hear about next week. And then I did that.
That's so valid.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
But Michael and I did find the actor who plays Christy reading her own book on YouTube.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's why you're talking about her actor. I see.
Which she did a great job. I don't think it was like a sanctioned official. Like I don't think that was on there with her permission. I don't know where it came from.
yeah, I don't know.
Sorry, Christy's actor.
She does a good job.
No, she does a great job. It's really cool to hear a young actress playing the character who's the main character of the book read the book.
Yeah.
That's neat.
I won't talk about the TV show too much then. But what I love that they kept in the TV show is that they kept the first person narration.
Oh,
so
nice.
They do voiceover for, like, each girl has, like, their own kind of leading episode, similar to the books, where, like, each book is, like, when it's Claudia's book, it's, like, that's her first person point of view. When it's Marianne's book, that's her point of view. So they do a similar thing for the TV show where each episode does have the girls narrate some of the inner thoughts, I guess, of the characters.
Yeah. But that's so important, too.
Which is so
much
important to, like, this series and just, like, maintaining the overall, like, vibe of the books. They did obviously modernize it because it came out in, like, 2022 or something. And so now they have, like, cell phones. They talk about social media and stuff like that. But they still managed to, like, kind of still maintain, like, this kind of, like, retro, like, small town vibe, which I appreciated. Still the most devastating thing when Netflix canceled it after 2 seasons. Like, I was just like, this was one of the best adaptations of a children's series that we've had in a long time. And I'm just sad about it.
You know what? We'll make it a mission for the recap, because we always do a recap at the end of the season. We'll watch some of the Netflix show.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk
that
about
sounds
it
good.
then. But I think that's really great they kept the narration, because so much of a child's experience is in their own head.
Mm-hmm.
Like, children often don't, like, they're not able to project their thoughts because they don't have the vocabulary for it, or they just don't have the confidence to. And so being able to get into the kids' heads. But also a really great aspect of the storytelling that I really appreciated was that we'll often get, like, tangents with the journal, the diary that all the girls keep, like, collectively, of, like, their perspectives. And so we're not stuck in one character's perspective. Sometimes we're able to jump in and out, and then they'll be able to commentate on each other's perspectives too.
Yeah.
Like in real time.
It is fun in, like, Christy's book when she's talking about basically, like, Stacy has, like, a crush on Christy's older brother, Sam. And
happens immediately.
Yeah, it happens immediately. And Sam kind of likes Stacy back, but then it's kind of funny, like, seeing that told through Christy's perspective, because she's kind of like, Sam and Stacy were like, yeah, I think the other person is attractive, but I don't really see it.
Christy is shockingly cool with this. Like, a lot of kids that age that I knew, if this happened, they would flip. They would be like, how dare the universe is punishing me specifically.
It's kind of funny, though, because in true middle school fashion, Stacy has a huge crush on Sam, but she's also kind of dating this other kid at school. Like, that's like her boyfriend, quote unquote, but they don't really like hang out that much. It's just such a middle school thing, I feel like.
It must have been the second book that we didn't read where that gets us.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Established.
In the second book, basically, like, there's like a Halloween dance or something. And then Claudia and Stacy are like, we have to get dates to the dance, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah.
I gotta say, from what little we did get of it, it's every bit as like superficial and awkward as you would expect like a middle school like crush romance thing to be, because like we get a little bit of where Stacy's eats lunch at the school with, what's his name again?
Pete? Yeah.
Like one day, and
I don't remember all the random
boy number 3.
And like she's talking to him, and then eventually he's just like, because they've already like gone to a dance together, but then like he's like nervous and he goes, would you like to go to another dance with me? And she's like, oh, okay. And he's like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is so delightfully like,
I'm going to go run away
real.
now.
Yeah. It's great. But yes, I would love it if you guys watch the TV show, because I just think it's so wonderful. And like they did change a lot of things significantly, but it was like for the better. Like it doesn't like ruin the original series. It just enhances the experience. And yeah, it made me cry a lot.
Oh, I can't wait to cry too.
Yeah, there are some episodes where I was just like, oh, this is really like hitting me right now.
Aww.
I can't wait to watch it and feel nothing.
Oh my god.
And be like, oh, I'm such an alpha male. I'm an emotionally stunted rock. No.
Oh my gosh.
I'm kidding. Take that out if it doesn't sell as comedy.
Watch some clown music in the background so it sells as comedy.
That'll do it. I gotta say, though, what you said both about the Netflix series, which I didn't watch, but I can imagine, and what you said about the graphic novel, about how like the iterations add stuff to it that doesn't take away from like the goodness of the previous iterations. I have a bit of a confession to make. I read the first 2 books you had us read, the novels. And then I couldn't get a hold of Marianne Saves the Day quite so easily. And I was like, well, I can access the graphic novel. Victoria said she's most nostalgic for the graphic novels. I'm just going to try reading this. Mm-hmm. And like any issues that I had with like trying to make it through some of like the meandering plot or like the very like methodical prose was gone with the graphic novel. I was like, oh, this is doing everything for me. Like the art's really great. The breadth of characters, considering they babysit so many kids and have relationships with like the kids' parents specifically, who have their own unique personalities. It's a lot easier to keep track of everyone when you can see them. Yeah. And because there's many scenes with lots of characters in them, it's easier to get a beat on everyone's sort of like emotional state and reaction to things when you can see it play out. And so I really enjoyed that. And then I did a sort of hybrid approach with Claudia and Mean Janine. And it was like, again, a few of the differences that I was able to pick out were like for the better. For example, in that book, Claudia's babysitting Jamie and his like
baby sister,
who's not quite a newborn at that point, but still pretty little. And she has like an argument with her sister, Claudia does. And in the book, it's described where when it reaches a peak, she almost like balls up a fist to like hit her sister. And everyone's like, whoa, that was a lot. And even Claudia's like, I don't know why I did that. Yeah. In the graphic novel, they change it up a little bit where it doesn't reach a potential for violence at all, but Claudia yells at her sister to like, be quiet, shut up. And then after she takes Jamie and the baby home, and the baby starts crying, Jamie, who had been he'd been annoyed, but he'd been very considerate with the baby, yells at the baby to be quiet and shut up. And so he starts expressing his frustrations in a way that mirrors Claudia. And it's this interesting, like, it's good storytelling as narratively. So like that's, I guess, an example of like how the iterations of the thing carve certain pieces off and massage them into different expressions of those same core ideas. So I'm very interested at what the series does.
The series, for that book in particular, takes it in a very different approach. I was actually like, oh, they actually like changed a lot more in this book compared to some of the other ones. But it's so emotionally devastating.
Oh gosh. I was already pretty like emotionally hit with that one. I'm scared now. I'm like, I don't need to be destroyed more.
I don't want to be here anymore.
I think a lot of the times the Babysitters Club uses like the kids that they babysit for as like almost like foils or like mirrors of like things that are happening in their own lives to kind of convey the message. The TV show adaptation of Claudia and Mean Janine decided to take it more in like a cultural context kind of scenario to resolve the conflict between Claudia and Janine and like keep it more focused on just like the family, I think. But again, it's like both of these are fantastic ways of like exploring this like really complex relationship between Claudia and her older sister.
Tag yourself.
Yes, I was like, we should.
Which babysitter are you?
Which babysitter are you?
Which baby are you?
It doesn't really work though, because they're too realized.
Yeah.
To be like, that's me because we're both dumb.
Yeah. Okay. I guess this is like when I was reading this, I was like, I guess it'd been a while since I thought about like who like my favorite Babysitters Club member was or like why I particularly resonated with a lot of characters. I think when I was young, I was like 100% like Marianne because I was very shy.
I can see
and
it.
Quiet. Yeah. And I like wasn't very good at like standing up for myself. But I also think I was a lot of Christy when I was a kid.
I can see it.
Yeah. I think I was Christy in the way that I definitely was slightly that like bossy person to some of my friends, just like telling them what to do. I didn't tell this story. I wanted to tell the story during the Dino Thunder episode. And now whoever wants to hear the story is going to have to like dig through to find this. Basically, when I was in elementary school, I would play Power Rangers with my friends and it was always like, I think there were 3 of us. So I was always like the Yellow Ranger because she's the only girl. But at one point, I had like this vivid memory of like a bunch of other elementary school kids coming up and being like, hey, can we also play Power Rangers? And I was like, sure. And they're like, can one of us be the Yellow Ranger? You're always the Yellow Ranger. And I started crying and I ran away until they came and found me and they're like, you can be the Yellow Ranger.
But it's so important to you as a kid.
Yeah.
Like when you were a kid, that's your whole world. Like my identity as the Yellow Ranger. Yeah.
Anyways.
That feels a little more Marianne to me, to be quite honest.
That's true. It is also a little Marianne.
I mean, I feel like everybody contains multitudes. We can be multiple babysitters.
Well, that's what I'm saying is like, I think like there's like elements of each babysitter. Well, Stacy, I have the least in common with, so maybe not as much Stacy. And then Claudia is like, Claudia provided so much important representation for like Asian artsy kids. But I think like especially at that time, like many of the like portrayals of Asian characters were like literally Janine, like the super nerdy, reserved person. And then Claudia is like the complete opposite of that. But I was reading Claudia's book, and when I got to the moment where she's like, oh, I have Nancy Drew books stashed in my room, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot that Claudia like loves Nancy Drew. And I was like,
just like you for real.
Suddenly the most relatable character ever. But anyways, that's me. What about you guys?
I identify with Pete.
That's fair.
Which one's Pete?
Stacy's boyfriend? Question mark?
Yeah,
Who goes,
I forgot.
Okay, take 15 minutes, and then, you want to go to a dance with me? Oh, thank God it's over.
Yeah.
No, a little bit of the, I don't know if my mom may get a kick out of this. Certain stories she's told me about growing up, like when Christy describes like a neighborhood friend having a crush on Christy's older brother, I was like, that reminds me of some stories my mom told me. Having an older brother herself.
Oh, I see. I was like, do you have an older brother?
Yeah, so I guess that's a thing that happens. Thankfully, it never happened when I was growing up.
They had outlawed it.
That you know of, Michael. No, I'm kidding.
They'd put what's it called? Oh, I was looking for a word.
A ban?
Something like that. Forget it.
A tariff?
We're moving on.
A restriction.
I just think it's funny that in Christy's book, like anytime like a boy is mentioned, she's like, ugh, gross. grossest human being on the face of the planet.
I'm kind of like,
So funny.
come on.
What?
I don't know. I'm sort of like, they could just make Christy gay. They could just make Christy
Okay.
Yeah.
gay.
I wasn't sure.
I was like, I don't know.
I
if
thought
this
you were still referring to the word you were missing. I was very confused. No, I agree. No, they could make Christy gay.
Yeah.
Why
They
not?
didn't get that far in the Netflix show. That's
Makes
why I
sense
was
to
like,
me.
"Argh." No, but the Netflix show did do a lot more representation in terms of ethnicities and also queer representation, which was also fantastic. Another reason why you should watch it. This is just an ad for the Netflix.
Not sponsored, but if you want to sponsor us.
Yeah.
Now we're going to take a quick break.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix.
That would be crazy.
That'd be crazy.
They gave us $5.
But sorry, continue.
No, that's all I got.
Okay.
I was just like, I don't think these books go in this direction because it's still the 80s. But they totally could, though. Because it seems like, I don't know, it seems like they were doing a thing with Christy's character where it's like, no, it's the long, slow burn to Christy, like, going like, oh, I'm starting to like boys now. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's. I
Sure,
think
Christy.
I'm pretty sure that's how it happens in the series. Yeah, there is like even in like Stacy's book, she starts saying like, or it used to be like we would split into twos, like walking home from school because like Marianne and Christy are closer, and then Claudia and Stacy are closer. But then Stacy like briefly mentions like, but Christy started to like boys a little bit more, so now we're better friends.
I did notice something about Stacy where in her book, she uses the word traitor quite a lot. To
Heck
describe
yeah, Stacy.
Yeah.
Okay, so Stacy's whole book is about her diagnosis of diabetes, which I think like a lot of people were wondering how they would handle that in the Netflix adaptation because they're like diabetes is so much more normalized now that it's not like, oh, social pariah Stacy, because that's kind of what happens to her like back in New York. She gets this diabetes diagnosis and then like she loses a lot of her friends. Her best friend stops talking to her, not because she knows that she has diabetes, but because like Stacy has to go to a lot of doctor's appointments and
He's clearly sick.
yeah, is clearly sick, like keeps fainting in class and stuff like that. And it like causes like a big kerfuffle.
She's the subject of like some malicious rumors. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, she's contagious.
And you know, like middle school bullying is like anytime a kid is different, like they're going to pick on you for it. So that's why her family moves her to Stony Brook. And then at first, like Stacy is like, I don't know if I can tell my new friends. Like, what if they also stop talking to me? She crafts like a series of elaborate lies to like explain like when she has to be away for doctor's visits and stuff like that. Or when she can't go to a pizza party because she's afraid that if they're like having pizza, she can't have pizza. But for me, it was never about like her having diabetes. It was more about how her parents reacted to it.
Yeah.
Because her parents are so like, oh my God, our baby has diabetes. Like, she's gonna die. I mean,
We have to fix her.
yeah,
Yeah.
early on, like there was like a risk of like Stacy potentially like dying if she doesn't get the proper treatment. But after like things like stabilize, her parents are still like, well, like it's fine, but I feel like we should seek out new treatments to try and get your diabetes cured. And Stacy's very much like, I don't think there's a cure, Mom. Like, I think this is about as good as it's going to get.
I did love the ending sort of that book where they get that special appointment with that one like expert like pediatrician on like childhood diabetes. It's not like a very easy to see cut and dry like 90s sitcom Danny Tanner moment, but he just describes it as what Stacy needs is stability.
Yeah.
And it's hard for her to feel that she knows herself or knows her body or has a handle on her disease if every other month you're coming to her and telling her that you've got to stop everything that you have been doing and try a whole nother approach.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a really, I don't know why, but I feel like that's a really mature take on something that just felt right for the characters without like no one's cast as explicitly as the bad guy in any of these.
Yeah, like the doctor is very much like, I understand as parents you want the best for Stacy, and her parents are very much like, whatever it costs, like even if it's a really expensive medical procedure, we will do it because our daughter is important to us. And the doctor doesn't say like, you're terrible parents. He's just like, I think what Stacy needs more right now is something different.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like, it's such a good message about like bodily autonomy for kids. There's literally a line in the book where her parents are like, Stacy, it's not your decision. Like, we're your parents. Like, we're making the decisions for you. And she's like, but they're decisions about my body. And so she learns to basically like put her foot down and say, I'm the one who's being put through all these tests. I feel fine. If I don't feel fine, I will let you know.
Yeah.
But I like my current doctor. I don't want to switch to a new doctor. And I just think that's like really important. Whether you have diabetes or like some other disability or not, I think it's still important for kids especially to learn.
Well, it's interesting to like feature that as part of the plot, you know, because that's definitely something that comes up, I'm sure, for many families. And it's that uncomfortable space where it's like, well, the parents got to make decisions for their kid, but at the same time, this is an autonomous human being who's going to have opinions on what happens to their physical form. Yeah, it's interesting how often these books will address like what could be very nuanced and somewhat uneasy or uncomfortable topics, but do it with so much like grace and consideration.
Yeah. Well, also weaving in just like day-to-day life and other plot lines as well.
Yeah.
Because like in real life, you're not going to spend 100% of your time focused on this one thing.
Yeah.
You've got stuff going on.
Yeah. It's like Stacy's like, I've got my diabetes, but I've also like got the dance to worry about and like this boy in class that I like. And then there's also babysitting and there's also my friendships and like all these layers of like things that she's going through.
We're diversifying our business plan.
Oh, yeah. And then in that book, there's like a rival babysitters organization.
Oh, yeah. What a B plot, huh?
Yeah. So in The Truth About Stacy, I think that's actually like the A plot.
Oh, is it?
I feel like it is because that's like the main like problem.
It's the Babysitters Club books, at least the few that I've read, to me, sort of seem to have like an overarching A plot that sort of resolves itself or begins to resolve itself about 75% of the way through. And then there's like a B plot that sort of creeps up and becomes the A plot.
Yeah.
Like maybe 50% of the way through. And so like the plots weave in and out of themselves in terms of like prominence and like what the most important thing to deal with is at the time. Again, it's just like real life. Like you're not gonna have one thing to focus on at a time.
True,
There's gonna be multiple things going on. And things wrap up at different rates too.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really great and a really complicated way to plot your children's book. And I think it's really, really efficient. I still think that the first book doesn't do an amazing job at it. But again, that's the first book of your like 50 plus series of novels.
Yeah.
So
I'm like, how many Babysitters Club books are there?
But gosh, that agency, that ticked me off.
I knew exactly
60
the kind
to 80
of...
novels in the
60
series.
to 80.
Yeah.
And it was like one or two authors that did the first, I think 44, right? Before they switched off to ghostwriters.
Just kidding. Anne M. Martin wrote the first 60 to 80, and then after that, they were written by ghostwriters, which means there's way more books.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's deeply impressive.
That's so many books to write on your own with this level of like depth and care and like intricate character work.
Anyways.
Wow.
So back to The Truth About Stacy. One of the plots is there's a new babysitters agency who blatantly stole their business idea, basically.
And then it's like actually attacking them, like through espionage.
Espionage, like two of the babysitters agency members like pretend to leave the agency and join the babysitters club, but they're actually just there to like take on jobs and not show up to them to like make them look bad. Their whole system is that there's two like, I guess, founders, CEOs, and they like take the calls and then they just like find like within their network of babysitters someone who's available.
But because just random high school kids.
Yeah, but because they're like 8th graders or older, they get to like stay out later. Because they're older, they're seen as more responsible by parents. And so the Babysitters Club is like, what do we do? And they try like all these attempts to get more customers, like special deals. Oh, they come up with the kid kits, which I think are really neat, which is basically like a box of just like fun stuff that they bring to each babysitting job. You know, like when you go to your friend's house and they have like this board game that you really love.
Yeah.
That it's like that, but like the babysitter brings you the cool stuff.
Spoke to me as a kid. I was always the kid whose friends had the cooler stuff.
Yeah.
And so like, I want a kid kit.
I love Christy's description of it too, and how in that book she goes into like business mode. She's got like the visor and like the clipboard and everything. And when she's describing the kid kits, she's like, Or if that was even indeed her and not one of the other girls. But she's
I think
basically...
it was her, yeah.
Okay.
Because she comes up with like a 5-step plan, and like 4 of the steps are like, we indenture ourselves to the parents, and the other kids are like, whoa!
Yeah, one of the ideas was like,
kid kits,
one of the ideas was like, we'll do like household chores as like a perk to our clients. And they're like, I don't really want to.
Claudia's like, no.
Although actually in Dawn's book, which we skipped, she ends up taking on this client whose kids are like the craziest kids ever. And the mom is like newly divorced and like not really home. And Dawn ends up like doing a lot of the housework. And it's like basically a book about like setting boundaries.
Wow.
With your client, because like then...
As a freelancer, I could have used that like 8 years ago or more.
Yeah.
Dawn's my hero.
Yeah, Dawn is really great.
No, but these kid kits.
Yeah,
Right,
these
kid kits.
kits.
Brilliant. It's just like a box of like cool things, some of which, you know, are the babysitter's own possessions that are like cool board games and books, but some of which are like disposable, like crayons.
Yeah.
Or cookies.
Because it's always like the thing that you have at home is never as cool as something that someone else owns or brings to you.
Brilliant.
Even if it's like your favorite toy, you're like, but like your truck, that's a cool truck, you know?
Or like a Nintendo DS.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I had friends when I was like much younger that would have like, you ever see those like Pokeballs that would come with a little Pokemon on the inside?
Yeah.
I had one of those, but I had like a small keychain version of that. But I wanted the big one too.
It was like Pokeballs and like Transformers, Bakugan, lightsabers.
Yeah.
I mean, I've spoken about the hidden network of toy trading that happened at my brother's school.
Have you?
On the Power Rangers episode, I talked about how like he would trade like Power Rangers morphers with other kids in his class.
And then the Federal Bureau of Mom.
Yeah. My mom was like, give it back.
There's something about middle schoolers and starting a business that just really clicks. That really clicks with them. I don't know if that's something about being a middle schooler or growing up in the United States of America. You need cash for everything.
It's true.
The spirit of the lemonade stand lives
I
on
will
in many
say
forms.
The Babysitters Club is truly like the ideal of running a business.
Because you're not taking advantage of like your fellow kids. You're giving a service to like adults who desperately need that service. And you're doing a very good job at it, which is how they take down the agency. They don't need clever tricks. They just need to do a good job and not commit crimes.
Yeah.
Which
and
is
like,
what the
agency
agency
freaking does.
the agency
commit
is
child
like,
endangerment.
yeah, they like let Jamie go outside and play by himself.
He's
and
3.
they're always like bringing over their boyfriends while they're babysitting or
And,
like
smoking in front of the toddlers. Like, whoa.
Yeah.
And like amateurs extinguishing the cigarette in the pillow.
Yeah. I like how they plant it before it becomes obvious that like the agency is like not doing a good job. Like they'll just like show up at babysitting jobs and the kids just are kind of like grumpy or upset.
Listless.
Yeah.
And the life force sucked out of them.
Yeah, and the parents are kind of like, "Oh, like Charlotte's kind of in a bad mood right now, but you're her favorite babysitter, so hopefully you can cheer her up." Later on it's revealed like all these kids are like not happy because their babysitters are like bullying them. Charlotte's like she's in like 2nd grade or something and she's really smart. So a lot of the kids like make fun of her, call her a teacher's pet. Later they realize like, oh, she probably needs to be bumped up a grade. But like one of her classmates' older sister turns out to be her babysitter. And then her older sister, or no, the younger sister is like, my sister only babysits for you because she makes money.
Ruining the industry.
Yeah. I also just love like, I think in like The Truth About Stacy, the babysitter plotline also weaves in with like Stacy's personal story really well because it's like Charlotte's mom is a doctor and so Stacy can like go and like get some like medical advice. Again, like weave in like the multiple like agency stuff and also Stacy's diabetes and all that stuff.
But it's also about like community building.
Yeah.
Like because they're becoming like staples in the community, they're becoming known. Now they're able to call on the community when they need help.
Yeah.
Like, don't let me go to this bad doctor who's going to do what he says and then charge me thousands of dollars for nothing.
Yeah.
One final thing that we should touch on, because we're a nostalgia club.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any babysitting related stories or experiences? Because I don't. That was like the one thing growing up that I always felt was a little strange is that I never really had a babysitter or like babysat someone who wasn't like a direct relative. Because like growing up, my family was like the traditional like Asian, like live with your grandparents sort of a household. And so by the time my immediate family got their own place, I was old enough to not necessarily require a babysitter. And then whenever my parents were like, oh, we're busy, we'll just like drop you off at like one of your friends' houses. So I didn't like have an older teenager or child looking after me and telling me what to do. Which, like, part of me was always like, man, that seems like an essential part of the American experience. I kind of want to see what that's like.
I do wonder if babysitting in this regard, where it's like everyone in your neighborhood kind of like pitches in to like help take care of your kids when you're like away. I feel like that's not as common nowadays.
There's like a very specific like community-minded vibe that you need.
Yeah.
Like, I think in my neighborhood, we were some of the older kids, but we also didn't have a really strong connection with a lot of like the wider neighborhood. We had like, we knew like our neighbor, like our direct neighbors and stuff. But if there were to be babysitters, it would have been us, but they didn't really know us, so they didn't ask us.
Yeah.
And like, that's probably a good thing.
A good thing.
I don't know what to do with a kid. Just start crying, give him candy. Does that work? It's working now. Oh my God, I keep giving him candy.
I think I'm similar to Jino, where I've never babysat. Technically, like when I was young, there was like a family friend who basically would like babysit a bunch of kids, almost like a daycare, but it's just like someone's house. But then I think after I got a little bit older, then mostly it was just like my grandparents taking care of us.
Maybe it's also that a lot of schools, well, at least my school, had like services or after school activities that could serve as, we watch the child for you, pay us a little money.
Yeah. What about you, Michael?
Well, when you asked that, I was like, I don't know if I had babysitting experiences that much. And then I did a little more thinking. I was like, oh, I actually think I've had a lot of babysitting experiences. Not me doing babysitting, but being, watched. That sounded a little much. Being babysat. The reason I didn't say babysat is because I want to be a strong alpha male. I'm more willing to be watched than babysat. Because watched doesn't have baby in the name.
And I never sit. Always standing. Always on that grind.
Always vigilant.
Oh my gosh.
No, I was babysat a lot. When I was little, grandparents did a fair amount of babysitting because both my parents were like working at the time. I was watched by my aunt and cousins, 4 girls, all, decently older than me. So I had like getting all 4 members of the babysitters club.
Oh, wow.
I was well taken care of.
Yeah.
Eventually my mom stopped working and then just became like full-time mom mode, at least for a while. And then she did like part-time work and stuff. But you're always a full-time mom.
That's true.
And a full-time dad and a full-time parent, I should say.
Yeah.
Comprehensive term. But I have family who's done babysitting, even like relatively recently, like for new neighbors. I think it, like you're saying about how you know your immediate neighbors, I think if the timelines line up where you have maybe one person who's at like the right age to benefit from making a little money babysitting, some kids that happen to be at the right age to be needing a babysitter.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like, I think my neighbors, we were all around the same age, so we couldn't really like babysit each other when you're like only like 1 or 2 years older.
Do you guys ever think about that? At least in our parents' generation, you would have whole neighborhoods that would be filled with young parents that all seemingly moved there at the same time. Like in this one big wave, a bunch of young parents populate this neighborhood, and so you have a lot of kids running around. Now with our generation, we can't afford houses. So
I think it still does happen because I have seen it happen, but it is a different paradigm.
Yeah.
Especially depending on where you are.
But like, how did that happen? Did they coordinate? Do all the realtors go like, all right, send the parents here?
I think, well, one factor is usually like parents are looking for like what school zone
that makes
is
sense.
in, like the neighborhood is in. So if they're like, oh, we want our kids to be in like this school district, then they might look for houses within the area. And then I assume also like the real estate agent will be like, oh, like this neighborhood has a lot of like families. So like this would be a good fit for your kids. And I also think like certain like, for example, like cul-de-sacs are popular with families because it's a lot safer for kids to like play outside when there's like a circle, a ring of houses.
Yeah. I do have one babysitting story that came to mind.
Okay.
Cool.
Perhaps a kind of story that could have been in an episodic adventure for the Babysitters
Ooh,
Club.
okay.
In the sense that there was a little bit of conflict, but not so much that it's like terrifying. I'm a little embarrassed at this. So when I was, how old would I have been? It's that vague like elementary school age level. I was watched by a neighbor who's, how many years older? I forget, but she was decently older. She also had a younger brother who was still older than me as well. She was watching myself and my younger sister at like her house, her parents' house, whatever. And I, sort of to segue back to the idea of the kid kit, had the wonderful opportunity to play some of her younger brother's video games on like my Game Boy Advance.
Nice.
Elevated kid kits.
And I was like, this is awesome. And so I sit down, I plop down on the couch and go full couch potato mode. And I'm playing on my Game Boy Advance. And the babysitter, our neighbor, starts playing hide and seek with my younger sister. And then on one of the rounds, she can't find my sister. And she starts running around the house, yelling out, calling for my sister's name. And I'm just on the couch playing Game Boy Advance.
Like, she's fine. I don't care.
And as she goes by a couple times, she's like, Michael, help me look. And I'm just playing Game Boy Advance because I was like, I'm stuck in. I gotta finish this.
What game was it?
It wasn't even worth it. It was like some SpongeBob game. But I was
those are the best when you're a kid.
I was so into it. I was so into it.
Press A to punch, press B to jump. Hell yeah.
No, the gameplay loop was actually kind of like I was like, I really got to focus. Like, and
wow.
It's really rewarding. It was a platformer. I don't know why I remember this, but eventually she found my sister, and I guess I must have known my sister. I was like, listen, I love my sister. She could be a bit of a stinker when she was younger. And I was like, I was thinking in my head, like, she'll turn up.
Yeah.
I like to think I'm a considerate older brother, but that was my most older brother vibe of like, I'm sure my kid sister's fine.
Yeah.
And eventually my little sister turns up, and when my mom came to get us, I was like, uh-oh. I didn't help look at all. I just played video games. But our babysitter was like, no, they were fine. And I was like, oh, sick.
Babysitter's like, I'm not gonna mention this.
Yeah.
But I lost a child for a considerable period
That's
of time.
true. Yeah. If I was the babysitter, I also would be like, we were playing hide and seek. You know,
Well,
it's fine.
Quid pro quo then.
It was a really, really long game of hide and seeking.
Yeah. Didn't rat me out. I won't rat her.
Until now.
Water under the bridge.
That would have terrified me as a babysitter.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think it would have terrified anyone.
Yeah.
Only reason it didn't terrify me is because I was, I guess, also a little stinker.
Yeah.
I told you guys the story of how they lost me once, right?
What?
I think my grandmother was watching me. I mean, everyone was in the house. My grandmother was watching me, and then like I just vanished.
Whoa.
And they couldn't find me anywhere in the house, and they searched the neighborhood, and then they called the cops and the the fire department. And like there was like a neighborhood-wide search for me for like hours.
Whoa.
And at a certain point, my grandmother was like, okay, I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a seat, and pulled out a chair. And there I was.
How old were you?
Fast asleep. Like, I was like a toddler, I think.
Oh,
I
okay.
crawled
Okay.
in the space. Like, I was sleeping on two chairs that were tucked into the dining room table. And so if you look under the table, you couldn't see me because I was hidden.
I see.
And so
I
the
see.
only way you would have been able to find me is to pull out the chair, which, like, why would you ever think to do that? You've already checked under the table.
Gosh.
I was asleep the whole time.
You found the prime hide and seek spot.
Yeah. Too good.
Too good.
I gotta say, the way you described it makes more sense now that you say you were a toddler and probably don't have like strong memories. The way you described it was like, I vanished and I have no memory of that time.
I mean, I don't. Like, this was described to me afterwards by my parents. Like, oh, yeah, like, one time we got the cops called on you because you were asleep on a chair, and we just didn't look at the chair.
Yeah, because it's like he was sleeping, so he doesn't even remember them like searching around. You're a really deep sleeper.
I guess. Listen, when you got a nap, you got a nap.
That's true.
Catch those Z's.
Yeah. Well, thank you for reading The Babysitters Club.
That's great.
I'm so excited for you guys to watch the Netflix show.
So comforting. So
Yeah.
nostalgic.
So nostalgic. Speaking of like living in the same neighborhood and stuff, I think the Babysitters Club was like, I wanted to like be that close to my friends.
It's
Like I
so
wanted to be able to walk
aspirational.
across the street to like my friend's house and just like hang out, or like The fact that like Marianne and Christy, they like do like Morse code flashlight signaling to each other because their bedroom windows face each other. And Marianne's father is like, you have to be in bed by 9:30. And Marianne's like, no. So I was like, that's so cool that they can like have their secret code communications at night. That was my dream as a kid, but it's okay.
We live vicariously through these babysitters.
Yeah. Any last thoughts about the Babysitters Club?
Ran a business better than I ever could. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Chrissy's got a lot of ideas. She's like, there's a problem. I've got solutions. And I'm like,
Great ideas, even.
yeah,
They're
pretty
turning a
great.
profit.
Yeah.
They've got pocket money to spare.
I was also like, wow, inflation. At one point, they were like, if we each put in $3, we can do a pizza party. And I
Oh,
was like, ah, man.
pizza's so expensive. What
Yeah.
happened? Why is it $20 for a large pizza?
It's not even that good
With
for
one
you.
topping.
Yeah.
It's like, that doesn't even make sense in my brain.
Not even that good for you. It's not good for you.
That feels wrong.
But it tastes so good, Michael.
True. Well, before we feel too bad about the Babysitters Club, let's not forget that when they did their summer camp series for the kids, they brought Mallory in as an unpaid intern.
Oh, yeah.
They're like,
yeah.
we can't afford to pay Mallory, but she can come help.
Down with the Babysitters Club. Unpaid intern Mallory. She should unionize. Just on her own.
Just by herself. I don't think that would work out very well.
But seriously, thanks for introducing us to these books.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Nostalgia Club. If you like this episode, consider leaving a rating and subscribing. It really helps us out. Also, you can email us at nostalgiaclubpodcast@gmail.com or find us at Instagram at nostalgiaclubpodcast.
Until next time, if you're going to get into babysitting, literally read these books because you'll get some good ideas
Yeah,
from them.
actually, there's a
That's-
lot
yeah.
of like important like babysitting tips, like always make sure you have emergency contacts and know the kids' allergies. And here's how to resolve conflicts between kids.
Bring things to bribe the kids with.
Very important. And don't let the cat get into the next door neighbor's garden. Oh, fun fact. The next door neighbor is Dawn's like aunt,
Really?
like great aunt or something.
Oh, wow.
Her name's Mrs. Porter.
Oh.
And it's like so like they don't like really reference it in these early books, but Dawn's like, oh, my mom's name before she got married was Sharon Porter. You're like, that's not a
that's
coincidence
cool.
in these books. Oh, we didn't even get to talk about like how Dawn and Marianne's parents are going to date.
That felt a little bit like Deus Ex Machina to me, but I'm like, yeah, why not? It's a small town.
It's actually pretty cute.
Yeah, it's very cute.
Yeah.
It
It's
seems-
very like wholesome, like, oh, like his wife died and now he's like allowing himself to find love again. And then she just got divorced and it's like high school sweethearts reconnecting.
They even foreshadow it in the graphic novel
Mm-hmm.
with the Parent Trap.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
He's just
Yeah.
like, oh, you have the Parent Trap on DVD. And I'm like, come on.
They do mention that in the book,
Yeah.
too.
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't
good
pick that up. Smart. Smart.
Okay, bye.